Okay, we're back for, I think it's the third video, and in this one, I'm going to put this on my head here. Samba's watching the outside, making sure everything's okay. He's doing a good job. In this video, we've got the case out, we've got the case lubricated, ready for assembly, and then we're going to go ahead and put together the main drive, sprocket, and also the Kickstarter. I'll show you what those look like in just a second. Just to go through a little bit else, one of the reasons why I took the whole thing apart was not only did I clean it, but I had the whole thing soda blasted and cleaned to make sure that it's in really good shape. And from there you feel comfortable reinstalling everything and putting it back together again. So we're going to do that right now. So I'm actually going to put together the main shaft later. That's this piece right here, but that just drops in, so that's relatively easy. So this is the Kickstarter arm, you can tell because it says Kickstarter on it, which is kind of cool. And then the Kickstarter is actually five pieces, and I'm going to lay them out here. So this is the Kickstarter sprocket, the Kickstarter shaft. This is I'm going to call it just the Kickstarter mechanism for lack of a better word. There's a large Kickstarter spring. There's also a pin that I'm looking for that looks just like this. And this is a hollow pin. To get it out, you have to compress it and kind of lift it out. I put it in and out so many times, I hope I'm not actually wearing through its effectiveness. Okay, and the way that this works is this mechanism fits inside of the Kickstarter sprocket, and it spins around, but it locks in the other direction. And that allows you to push the crankshaft around, move the pistons up and down, and start the motorcycle, and go ahead and get that arm back into what would be the 12 o'clock position to do it again. So I'm going to go ahead and put this together. It's easier to kind of take a look at this. So that's about right there. And unfortunately, this thing doesn't just slide in. It can only go in at a certain point, which is here and right here. So this is an oil hole. As oil passes through the engine, it probably comes in through here. So if you see an adjoining oil hole, usually you have to line them up, but in this case there isn't one. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide this in. There's a little indentation here, and you got to find the corresponding indentation inside this assembly here. Next, you put the spring on. The spring fits in that little hole right there, and this is actually where it gets pretty tricky. So I need to go find my gloves. That's a glove, but that's the right one. Oh, here's the left one down here. And the reason why you need the glove is because you have to create a pretty significant amount of torque to put this thing on correctly, because you have to tension the spring right here. And the best way to do it is with a pair of vice grips. I've tried other pliers and other means to do it, but those means really suck. The best way to do it is with a pair of vice grips, and I'm going to show you how in just a minute. So you find that little spring. It's just wide enough for a pair of vice grips, and the trick is you got to move that back to be flush. I've actually got this on the wrong way. Let's get that on the correct way. Just right there. Put that back in the spring. And then there's a little dowel here. Hopefully you can see it. That dowel goes against this little piece right here, and what that does is that engages the mechanism so it spins freely. That's important because you need a place for it to stop as you do the cranking. So it stops at the 12 o'clock position, and it stops at the 6 o'clock position. Okay. So let's see if I can torque this thing enough to get it in here. And it's a little tricky, definitely. So you gotta put everything in exactly correctly. and then you gotta torque the shit out of it, for lack of a better term. Get everything inside here. Okay, that's gonna work. And I believe that's inside. And now you can release the lock. And we did it a little bit too soon, it looks like, because it's behind the dowel. However, the spring has slipped. The best thing to do is just take it apart and try it again. You could try to save it by getting a screwdriver or something like that, but it's just extremely difficult, and you might do more damage to the case than you'd like by doing that. So we're gonna try it again. So you gotta take it, and hopefully it doesn't fall off like that, because then you basically have to start from scratch. And I put this thing back together like maybe 3 times, and it's kind of a testament to how much of a pain in the ass this thing is, and probably explains, along with the electric starter, why these things don't have Kickstarters anymore, because of the amount of torque that's required, and this double spring is just like really a big pain in the ass. I mean, everybody knows how badass it is to, like, you know, kick a motorcycle to start it. However, it's a big piece of metal inside the motorcycle. It's another thing to break. So you can definitely see why they're not nearly as popular anymore. And you just got to kind of position your hands correctly so this thing slides in there. And I don't think I torqued it enough, and I didn't. And see, it came off the vice grips again. I think I'm gonna probably end up editing this video and shortening it. Okay. There we go. It's in there, and we're going to release this spring, and hopefully it doesn't slide down that thing again. And that time it doesn't. It fits right in. And now we're sticking out a little bit, so I got to get this thing back in this hole. Hopefully you can continue to see it. And now there's torque on it, which makes it difficult to put into this kind of receiving hole. I'm gonna go get a dead blow hammer. Maybe that's gonna help if I bang on it a little bit. Let's find where the hammers are, right here. So let's see if this works. Come on. Ah, I got it. Okay, and you hear that metal pinging together. That means that that's in there. And as I said before, it should spin freely, and that means that it's sufficiently torqued. When we get the whole thing together, I'm going to show you how it cranks. But then there's the pin. This is extremely important not to forget this, because I couldn't even imagine how the gears inside this thing would rip apart if you forgot this. I'm going to use a block of wood here. That's going to make things a little bit easier. Okay. Judging from the amount of indent that I put in that thing, that we finished it. So this, and this is actually a good side of the table to do this from. So this is the main drive assembly. It fits in here like this. There's a piece of the transmission that fits in there. You've got yourself a bearing here, and that's kind of how it works. It's got this little ring in here. You see a lot of these different rings in here as guides throughout the engine. But what's really important is this black thing here. It's an oil seal. It limits oil from spilling out of the engine. In this case, you know, down the back of the engine. It could catch on fire if the engine's hot, or if it hits exhaust, all kinds of bad things can happen. So you should replace these oil seals. They come in a set. They're like 35 bucks. You know, you can go to a website called 4into1, and it's a vintage CB750 website. It's an outfit up the road in San Francisco. We're here in San Jose, California. And to take that off, you have to undo these two bolts. The best way to do it, because the sprocket moves, is to put it in a vise, but you don't want to put it in a vise metal on metal. So you just get a piece of wood here, and I think I actually have kind of the sprocket holes still in here. You secure it there, you get a wrench, you undo it, and then you torque it back to spec, which I believe is 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds. I think it's a 6mm bolt. Most of the bolts in this thing are 6mm, and they have the same kind of requirement. So that goes in here like this. It's best to kind of move the oil seal back so it's flush. You drop it inside, and then you come back here, you find this ring, and then you kick it back so it's kind of all the way down, like 90 degrees. Then you make sure that oil seal is sealed. You know, I debated whether I was going to put Honda Bond, which is a gasket material, in there to add more bite to this oil seal, but I figure it could mess with the movement of the bearing, which you obviously don't want to do. And the other thing is, it wasn't on here before, so I just figure, you know, it's better to do it the way that it was instead of messing with it and changing a bunch of shit that you don't know what you're doing, and hopefully, you know, not cause another problem. So these are the two first pieces that we put in. Again, the crankshaft that should spin freely. That pin should, or that piece of the spring should be secure in this little divot here. The other piece should be inside the kickshaft assembly. The pin should be secure, and again, it should spin. It should spin freely, and it moves a little bit, but it won't later. And then you've got the main drive here. Man, that does wobble quite a bit, which is a little unnerving, but it should work just fine. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next video, and I'm gonna take a break.